Now will we see the magic?
All right, where's Murray? Okay, who is it?
This is Jesus, kid.
Know then that it is the year 10,191.
Yes, we are bored. We're all bored now.
Hi, good night.
Good night.
Hello, and welcome to Mary vs. the Movies with your host, Mary Jones.
And I'm Dennis Ling.
And this is episode 94, which is falling for us as we're recording it right before the 2-year anniversary of our show.
Our show-iversary.
It is our show-iversary. So, for whatever reason, I couldn't make it that, the 2-year anniversary also fell on the 100th episode, but, it's close.
Yeah.
So, and what better way to celebrate?
Did we celebrate our 1-year anniversary? I don't remember.
I don't remember.
Oh, show-iversary? But,
yeah, I'm sure we said something at the time, but I couldn't tell you at this point. I'm not even sure what episode that would have been, actually.
Yeah.
But I thought, what better way to celebrate our 2-year show-iversary? 2-year show-iversary of a movie podcast than by spending 2 hours watching two men just talking.
Or eating. We don't know.
Well, it is called, and the movie we're watching tonight is, My Dinner with Andre. And so I assume there is food being eaten.
Yeah, this isn't Babette's Feast, but who knows?
But, which is also on our list, as I've never seen that.
Yeah.
But as far as I know, this is just a movie of two guys talking for 2 hours. I've heard of this film. I've seen it referenced often. I know that there's an entire episode of Community, which is an homage to it. But I don't really know more than that. I know it's Wallace Shawn.
Right.
Probably best known as a character actor. Everybody who has seen The Princess Bride, of course, remembers him as Vizzini. But he's done lots of other stuff.
Was he in Woody Allen things?
I think he was in Woody.
Husbands and Wives or something like that?
Yeah, I'm sure he has been in stuff like that.
The adult stuff.
He's done cartoon voices. He was the T-Rex in the Toy Story movies. I mean, look, this is a guy who has done everything from, what we just mentioned to a Hallmark Christmas movie where, if I remember correctly, he is the guardian angel of a woman who keeps getting turned into Santa Claus. It was a very weird...
I don't remember that part. I remember him he wasn't an elf, but he was some spirit of Christmas something.
That's just it. He was an angel or something.
Yeah.
And it was very strange because he looked like he was dressed like a bellhop.
Yeah.
That's probably one of the stranger things I've seen him in. But he's done a lot of stuff, and everybody has seen him somewhere at some point. He is also a playwright. I think his most famous work, which I also believe was a film, is called The Designated Mourner. So he is kind of well regarded in that field. His father was also named Shawn. I'm trying to remember what his father's first name was, but he was the editor of The New Yorker for a long time. So he's a Nepo baby. And apparently an ardent socialist. So, sometimes those go hand in hand.
Yeah.
But yeah, well, Shawn, everybody just thinks of him as this, kind of weird character actor guy, but he has this interesting pedigree and career. And I don't know who the other guy, Andre, is. I just know his name is Andre. I
believe it's Andre the Giant.
It is. God, I wish it was. Man, now that.
What are we going to eat?
Oh. You got to make it sound more French.
Eat a lot. I know.
That wasn't very French.
It wasn't.
I wish it was My Dinner with Andre the Giant.
I just thought of it this second.
Yeah. Really?
Yeah. It just popped in my head. Oh, Andre the Giant.
That would have been great.
In Greenland.
Yeah. So instead, I think this Andre, is he a composer or something? He's some sort of artsy dude, right?
I guess.
I don't remember what the guy's name is beyond Andre.
All right. So important. What do you think's on the menu?
Oh, okay. So this movie is 1980, 81, sort of. It's early 80s. It's New York City. What is the annoying cuisine of the early 80s? Is there salmon?
Mussels.
Okay. Yeah, that feels right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what was all considered, hot.
Hoity-toity.
Yeah.
And
And look, as far as I know, they're not sitting in a diner and talking. They're in like a high-end restaurant. It's funny. I'm trying to think of like what was considered, fancy food in the early 80s. And
Does one of them die?
No.
Are they buddy cops?
No.
Okay.
They don't have an affair with each other. This is not going to be like when De Niro and Pacino sit down and Heat. Yeah. In fact, I'm kind of fascinated.
You do what you do, and I do what I gotta do.
Wait, was that supposed to be Wallace Shawn?
A little bit. Sorry.
Yeah.
Basically, my inner Wallace Shawn is a little Gilbert Godfrey-ish.
See, but they're not the same.
I know.
So I'm kind of fascinated that this movie exists and is as well known as it is, because I can't imagine what talking for 2 hours on screen is like.
Well, you can after last week.
Well, that's the thing. Yeah, well, so here's the thing. Yeah, if last week we had one guy talking for 2 hours, now we've got two guys talking for 2 hours.
Yeah.
Double the fun. Will the camera be as dynamic as watching Swimming to Cambodia? This is not directed by Jonathan Demme, who I think had an uncanny eye for capturing live performance.
Yeah.
I don't know who directed this. I can't imagine it's going to be as visually interesting and engaging as Swimming to Cambodia. And that's why I'm kind of fascinated that people know this movie. Like, what is this movie that, people have referenced it well into the 21st century? It's just two guys talking.
Is there a previous film that did this?
I don't know.
A French film or something? Or
Because it feels like a French idea, right?
It sure does. Yeah.
It just, there has to be some sort of French precedent for this.
Yeah.
Otherwise, where did this come from? Who decided? It's not like it. Okay, two guys just talking for 2 hours. I mean, you're kind of describing something like Beckett, right?
Beckett or what's the knight in Death playing chess?
Oh,
yeah.
Do you mean?
Yeah.
The Seventh Seal,
yeah.
Or I could imagine a European film doing this long before. And so, I guess this is maybe the American version of a European idea. I don't know.
Yeah. Oh, I know one line from it.
Well, don't tell it to me.
Yeah.
Will the line stand out to me? Will it be something that would be very memorable?
I'll tell you later.
Okay.
So you were not a fan of Waking Life.
Yeah, I did not like Waking Life at all.
But you were a fan of Slacker.
I loved Slacker.
I feel like those two, I bet.
Oh God, you know what? Yeah, Richard Linklater is another guy who would probably do something like this.
Exactly.
In his own way. I don't even remember why exactly Waking Life bothered me. It really did, though, when I saw it. And I honestly, I couldn't tell you what was bothering me about it when I watched it. It's not like I can't sit and watch people just talk.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, I hope I don't have the same reaction as I had with Waking Life. Although that could have just been something about me at that age. I don't know. I was in my early 20s, and who knows. Well, shall we go listen to two guys talk for 2 hours and then come back and talk for 2 hours?
Let's watch them.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is our 2-year show-versary. Mm-hmm. So we've seen Xanadu, Real Genius, Dune, Mystery Train, now My Dinner with Andre.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think, is there something I'm missing from the theme song?
You're the one who made it.
Yeah. But so we are down to one more movie that we have to catch. We've covered all the samples that I put into our song.
Do you remember what the sample is that we don't?
I do.
Okay.
I know what it is.
So the moment
you
were vibrating.
Yeah. I get so excited.
And it comes about an hour into the film.
Yeah.
This really is a film that is 95% two guys sitting in a restaurant talking. The other 5% is Wallace Shawn either on the subway or in a cab.
Or a waiter being annoyed at them.
True. I understand.
Yeah.
I understand. I've worked in a diner. I get it. And really not that different, except that we didn't have bottles of wine that are cradled, if you will, in baskets, like little Moseses.
Yeah.
I've never seen that before. I've never been in that fancy of a restaurant.
Yeah.
I shouldn't say that, but at least that's not a thing that people do anymore.
No.
As far as I'm aware. Yeah, so about an hour into the film, or 2/3 or whatever, I'm not entirely sure. Yeah, you hear that line.
We are bored. We are all bored now.
Yes, exactly. And I just paused the film and I went, wait a minute. And Dennis leapt up. And he was so happy. He's like, you heard it. You finally heard it. I was like, yep, we did it. I did not expect, because I don't even know if I told you that this was going to be on the list. I don't know how you knew to put My Dinner with Andre on.
Oh, I'd seen the list. Like this was.
When did I show you the list?
There was like 300 on like a list.
It's up to like 500 now.
Yeah, and like this was when it was like I think was it on a spreadsheet or something?
It's still on an Excel file.
I think everything on that I used was on that list.
Oh,
so.
okay, all right. Yeah, this is not a film that has a plot. It's very funny when you open like the Wikipedia page on the movie and it has plot. I'm just like, really? But I mean, yeah, the framing device is you have Wally Shawn, who is a sometimes working, often not playwright and actor, who's been avoiding his sometime collaborator, the director Andre Gregory, who suddenly wants to hang out with him and get back into theater.
And he's been away from the theater for 5 years.
Yeah.
He just kind of dropped out and then was like hugging trees or something and crying.
Yeah, basically had a midlife existential crisis, which
Yeah.
I get. You know, I'm constantly careening into one of those. And part of the film is him telling the story of his time dropping out of society and just going on all of these workshops and retreats and you know, all of the insight that he got from it. And then it's basically just Wally reacting to most of what he's saying. And then they part for the night. Shawn goes home.
Last week, we heard one person talking, and now we'll hear two people. But halfway through the film, we still had just heard one person talking.
Yeah, I mean, it really is mostly...
Wally is just staring in disbelief most of the time. Like, what is happening in front of me?
And it's funny because every so often he'll interject and just say, yeah, man, that's real weird. And it kind of reminds me of this other thing that isn't as good of an anecdote, you know. And he'll just kind of tell this sort of half-hearted story of like, and the whole time he looks very perplexed. And it's interesting because the film is really smart in that it builds, right? So you have Andre telling the story of his seeking to wake himself up. He hit a wall, essentially, as an artist, and he has hit a wall with life in general. And a lot of what he talks about is a preoccupation with, you know, that line about we're bored, we're all bored now. How to not be bored, how to be frankly woke, how to be aware of the world as you are in it and a completely alive human being, and getting away from, you know, acting, because acting is making all of these sort of overthought decisions of how to express a thing, and instead to actually live the reality of these things that you're supposed to express, right?
Right.
So he's, and I understand what he's talking about, because, like, you know, I mean, I took some acting, you know, I know about Stanislavski and all that stuff, and so, like, I understand, like, part of what he's getting at on an artistic level, but he's also talking on like a spiritual level and on an emotional and unconscious level, and how you relate to people, and this idea that, you know, we spend all of our time essentially mediating ourself and everything else, right? So that, are you ever fully engaged in the moment? Every morning I get up, right, and I go downstairs and I do yoga, and then I do meditation, right? And what the type of meditation I'm doing is mindfulness meditation. So it's a lot of you know, sitting there and sort of forcing yourself to be aware of your environment, right? So that you try not to let your thoughts go off into, oh man, I got to work on that file today, or, you know, I'm just obsessing over, you know, this situation with my mother, or, you know, like you're trying not to think about that, so that, you know, you're focusing on your breath, and you're focusing on, you know, the sounds in the room, right? And it's not unrelated to kind of what he's talking about in this film. Right. That sort of searching for authenticity as a human being in the experience. And the reason to seek that out is really as a bulwark against fascism, right? Because a lot of this film is obsessed with, like, these guys are obsessed with fascism and with the Nazis. And, weirdly enough, I don't know how that sounded in 1981, but it sounds really relevant now. And I have a feeling, well, Shawn looks at the world and says, yeah, I kind of already knew this was what was coming, because there are whole lines in here about, there's this wonderful moment where Andre is describing how the future. This is 1981. This is when Reagan comes to power. And the future is all of us being reduced to sleepwalking through life and not being able to say no to essentially global capitalism, right? And so that everything that makes us human is stripped away from us.
You know what the opposite of that would be? That would be woke. So it would be
Well,
anti-woke people, you might say.
Yeah, basically. And it's great because his passage, when he talks about this, and he mentions the 1960s and kind of like the attempt at social and psychological renewal and revolution and everything as being this kind of last attempt at overthrowing that sort of system, right? It's great because it echoes Hunter S. Thompson's famous passage from Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, where he talks about, seeing like the crest of the wave and then everything coming after, that famous passage. And it very much evokes that same sense, right? So you have a whole film of it starts off with, Andre telling like these kind of strange stories about these retreats he goes on and, undergoing these kind of like baptism rituals, which is really funny because years later he would but he would be in Scorsese's Last Temptation of Christ as John the Baptist, which is, I kind of forgot about that because I was wondering why this guy seemed vaguely familiar, aside from hearing the line from our intro. But so, he tells these stories about going to Poland and not being able to speak to these people and, undergoing these like spiritual awakenings and these rituals.
Yeah,
and
they form it's this group called the Beehive.
Yeah.
Like first he's like with these like students that they're like musicians or something, and right now he's all about kind of anti-acting and just leading people in some kind of journey or something. And then they join with this other group called the Beehive, where they just have no goal at all. Like
Right.
they just walk in and then go.
He describes this sort of thing where he goes through these baptism rituals and stuff.
It's like singing and chanting and just kind of repeating, like repetition.
Mm-hmm. And then later he tells a story about how, in a different circumstance, a group of his friends all went off to like somewhere in like Montauk, which is like the end of Long Island, and in an abandoned estate, essentially enacted like a death ritual where they're buried alive. And it's this very spooky. It all happens on Halloween, and these people all dressed in white, and they like, lead them through the forest blindfolded and strip them naked, and then, essentially bury them alive for a short period of time.
I wonder if who made Eternal Sunshine?
Oh,
Gondry.
Yeah, Michel Gondry, but the writer was Kaufman.
Oh yeah, I wonder if they were specifically thinking of that.
I don't
because
know.
Montauk is, the word they say.
Right.
That's where they go.
I thought about that too, hon.
Yeah.
For those who don't know, that was our first kind of not quite a date, was to go see Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, which, by the way, is an insane idea to have that as your first date. I mean, it really, I don't know, we're here again, we've been together, 18, 19 years now?
Yeah.
And it's kind of amazing that we have. In fact, isn't it going to be like 19 years in April?
Yeah, 2004.
Yeah, and it's 2023. So, yeah, 19 years ago, right around this time, we went and saw Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, which is one of the most amazing films of the 21st century. But there, again, that whole movie takes place in Montauk.
Yeah.
And, so, yeah, when he describes this, like, death and rebirth ritual in Montauk, I had the same thought. And it's great. And so he's trying to get into all of these ideas and the idea of just forcing yourself to be without purpose by forcing yourself to constantly being busy and constantly like, moving and seeking things out. And, you're not being fully conscious as to where you are in the moment. And, and I understand what he's going on. And what's great is you go through an hour and a half of this, right?
Yeah.
And then finally, Wally just kind of speaks up and says, I don't know what you're talking about. It's wonderful. I mean, it really is, because I'm sitting there for an hour and a half,
and you sort of think that's what he's thinking because he looks perplexed the whole time.
He does, but he does try to give those little kind of like interjections.
Yeah, and I thought it was kind of like George Costanza and Kramer just going off.
Yeah.
Like a more cerebral Kramer.
Yeah.
Going off, and then George Costanza like, what?
But it's great because then he just kind of stops and says, man, my apartment's so cold I have to sleep with an electric blanket. I can't go off and futz around for a year.
But that electric blanket is keeping you from living life.
Yeah, and here's the thing, okay, because Andre sort of has a point here, and we'll get to that in a second. But I do love, because the whole time I'm sitting here and I'm watching this and I'm listening to these stories, and like part of me is at first just kind of like, man, these are some crazy stories, and I'm also sitting here and just going, I really wish I could just drop out of life for 5 years and do this, because I get, every day I get, yes, I get up and I do yoga and I meditate. Okay, yeah, I do that for like an hour, like all that stuff, and I eat breakfast and everything, and then I work, right? Like, I can't just drop out of life. We have a mortgage, we have bills to pay, we have, if I left my job for where would my health care come from? What would happen, with my 401k? I have all these worries. And so the whole time I'm fascinated by everything he's saying, and I love it, but I'm getting a little resentful. Right? And I wonder if everybody else in the audience is getting a little resentful listening to him having all these crazy experiences and having all these thoughts and talking about fascism and talking about like being awake and all this stuff. And then and then finally Wally just stops and says, I can't even heat my apartment. And I'm worried about cockroaches crawling into my coffee. And I go, hell yeah, man. Oh, thank you.
Yeah, it's like what's his name of Common People?
Yeah, oh my God, it is Jarvis Cocker. Yes.
You can call your dad and stop it all, man. And both these guys could.
Yeah, oh yeah, exactly.
But, they don't have to look at that cockroach.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, they will both say, Shawn and Gregory will both say, like, these characters, they're us, but they're not us.
Yeah.
Right. And I understand what they mean by that, where, they are having these ideas and these concepts and stuff. But, the fact that you then have, the fictional Wally just saying, yeah, that sounds great, but most people, we can't do that.
I think part of why they did that is that instead of having just two people agree with everything, I think they just kind of put all of the fear and all of the worry in one character, and all of the like the pan, like,
existentialism,
world traveling, all in this other character.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Pan, because they bring up Pan. They talk. Andre tells this story about, this guy who was like a mathematician or something, and, extremely rational. And then all of a sudden he started seeing fawns everywhere. And by fawns, we mean like Mr. Tumnus. Yeah. And like they said, hey, we'll even introduce you to Pan, And they do. And they do. and that's great because, and I have no idea where he got this story from. I don't know if this is an actual like legend about some guy in Scotland, or if this is something that like,
well, the mathematician is real, and like the place that he went is real.
Findhorn is real. Yeah. It is a retreat in Scotland. Mm-hmm. So I have no idea if that is like a story he told. But like the idea of Pan itself is really interesting to me, because you're getting into kind of a Victorian obsession with Pan. Yeah. Okay, as the god of nature and sexuality, the anti-civilization, and getting into this kind of romanticism, right? Yeah. And Gothic literature. What is his name? Like Arthur Machen, who wrote The Great God Pan or something like that. Or, gosh, I'm trying to remember all like these books I read, a couple years ago. But it's interesting to evoke that and that sort of wildness, because it's also very tied into like this journey that Andre goes on, and it is, it does have this spirit of Pan running through it, right? But that's great that then, what happens is it has to get grounded. Yeah. But at the same time, why, as Wally says, why does everybody have to go be dragged to Everest just to, experience what you're experiencing? Why can't you experience it in real life?
What store was it? The next door, it's like the 7th Street like drugstore or something.
Yeah, I can't remember the name of the drugstore, but and he has, and the thing is, he's right?
Yeah.
Like, there's nothing wrong with what Gregory, with his character, what Andre is saying. There's nothing wrong with it. I identify with a lot of it. And I think the part is, they make a point that Wally does sort of identify with what he's saying.
Well, Wally definitely agrees with, technology is ruining us.
But as he says, he's still not going to give up the electric blanket.
Yeah. Because
it is cold. But, I think, Andre has an interesting point there. And let me see if I can find my notes on that. Yeah, I mean, I sat there just taking notes the whole time because I'm just like, there's a lot of stuff that they're saying in here that I found really resonant, which surprised me. I didn't expect to find it as thought-provoking as it is. Because, again, I just knew it was a movie about two guys talking. I didn't know what it actually was. Andre has a point that technology can put us into a dream world.
Right.
Using technology to make ourselves personally comfortable, it is very easy to then cut yourself off from the reality. So when he says, that the electric blanket is the problem, he says if you go and you have to get up and throw extra blankets on your bed, you are in touch with the reality that it is cold in the room. But if you have the electric blanket, you can just kind of ignore that.
If you're aware it's cold in the room, you worry about how cold your partner is, then you think about other people in the world that are cold. It's, you develop empathy. And
I don't think the idea is, so never use an electric blanket. Andre might be saying that, but the film is not saying that. Because, again, that's why you have Wally there, to kind of ground what he's saying. Because, then Wally says, yeah, but it's really cold, and I'm not getting rid of my electric blanket because it is cold.
Yeah.
But they absolutely have a point that when you are somebody who has comfort, right, you can easily lose empathy for everyone who is not in your situation.
Right.
And that's really what the film is about. The film is about trying to find empathy and to try to find some self-awareness.
But also avoid fascism.
Well, yeah, because that's how you avoid fascism.
Because it's interesting, it's not just Wally that's, kind of perplexed. Every now and then, Andre will be like, then I realized I was doing all this stuff. I'm just a Nazi.
Yeah. He compares himself to Albert Speer, the architect.
And I should be put on trial and that kind of thing.
But I think I understand aside from the fact that I have my own weird guilt complexes and, in fact, we just had a whole conversation, recently about what motivates us.
Yeah.
And so, it was weirdly relevant. I'm primarily motivated by guilt and fear. And you're motivated by
the wind.
The wind, nothing.
Yeah, pretty much.
You just kind of exist.
Yeah.
It's funny watching this and just realizing I understand everything that Andre is saying, but when Wally comes back with, no, I feel like I have to be busy. If I'm not busy, if I'm not doing something, he can't really calm down, right? That character has to be planning something. He has to be doing something. There's a moment where they talk about Andre is obsessed with this idea of just sort of being so perfectly in the moment that you're not doing anything. And as Wally says, yeah, well, no, when that happens, I'm getting up and reading a book. I'm thinking about, what we're going to eat or something. The idea is, he can't just not be doing anything. He can't really be in the moment. And that's why when I get up in the morning, I force myself to do this mindfulness meditations because I can't do that either. I always feel guilty if I just sit down and don't do anything. I worry that I'm one of those people who are deadening themselves by constantly feeling like I have to do this, I have to do that. There's a million things I have to get done. And if I don't get them done, I'm a bad person. I feel guilt if I don't do things, right? I'm looking at my phone right now and I'm thinking did I get enough steps in today? I don't know. Look, we spent the whole day walking around New Hope, Pennsylvania. It's not like I didn't do anything all day, but I'm looking at my little rings on my phone and it's oh, I didn't close the ring yet. I better run around the block before midnight. So I find it very difficult to just kind of sit and relax, right? Because then I feel guilty about it. It's not that it's physically difficult for me to do, but it's emotionally difficult for me to do, right? I get where he's coming from.
So he's talking about how we should be avoiding this dream life. And I was thinking about how this is a movie, and a movie is is a dream.
Yeah.
So it's this dream telling you to wake up,
Oh my God, you're right.
Yeah.
It is in a way lucid dreaming.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. There is a lot of talk about waking and sleeping and dream worlds and the way the technology is narcotizing.
Maybe we should watch Waking Life again.
I don't know. Maybe I would gel with it better now.
I remember liking it, but maybe I didn't get. Maybe we'll have the exact opposite opinions when we watch it. You'll love it, and I'll hate it.
Does this make sense as a movie?
I feel like that they made it as a movie, not so much to like have everyone. We're not all supposed to. They're not just saying like, well, everything that Andre says is true, and you're all dumb for not thinking it or something like that.
Right.
I think it's more that instead of making this a play, they're making it a movie because they want to just throw this out to a wider audience.
So you think it's because theater would be more limited?
Yeah, like he even says that like showing this to the elites, you know, is still a kind of going to sleep or something.
Okay.
You know, it's like just pointing this stuff out is, you know, to people who already feel superior is just, you know, it's not a call to action. It's just, you know, pointing something out.
Well, but then they get into the question of, can art ever really truly be a call to action? Because there is a sort of, you know, once you put something out there, you take away a little bit of the energy.
Well, by action, I think in this movie they're talking about personal action, within yourself. Wally taking the cab instead of going on the subway is his action.
Okay.
It's his like first, you know, maybe the first step to a larger world type of thing.
Yeah, I think in making it a film and not a play, yeah, you are kind of reaching a wider audience. You know, going to a play is something that, it's not that people don't go to plays, but normally if you go to see a play, it's either your kid is in it,
Yeah.
right, or you're a theater person.
Right.
And yeah, being a theater person is different. Like, everybody goes to the movies. I think it's brilliant. I love this film. When I read that, like, Ebert thought it was like one of the top 5 films of the 1980s, I don't think he's wrong. But this is a very specific kind of film. It really is two guys talking philosophy for 2 hours.
Like, so for one thing, I don't think it's the same as Swimming to Cambodia, which is definitely a performance piece.
Well, this feels like a play.
I feel like it's somehow tied to With Nail and I. Something made for playwrights, for like actors.
Yeah.
It just feels like, here's stuff for theater people.
Well, honey, I hate to tell you this, but I used to be theater people.
Oh, you still are? I mean...
Well, I still go, but I'm not involved.
I'm just saying that your brain still works that way.
I think so.
And
yeah.
I feel like that theater people think about things in a certain way, you know, like how they approach acting is different than like other actors and that kind of thing. And I feel like that those two movies specifically attack these things.
Yeah, but in very different ways. And I'm glad that you point out, this is still a movie. This is still more of a play in the way that Swimming to Cambodia is a spoken word piece, right? And that is a performance. That's a piece of performance art. This is very much a play because this is about exploring the ideas through these two characters, right? So this is much more tied to, like, I don't know, Beckett or Albee or something like that, you know, where you're using these characters, but they are characters. Like, they have personalities, right?
Yeah.
Like I said, I agree. I don't think the personalities should be completely identified with the people playing them. You have this spiritual seeker and like, mystic in a way in Andre. And he's also privileged, but he is searching for, you know, a way to get in touch with like an authentic humanity, right?
Yeah.
So who do you have to play against him is this frustrated, fearful, you know, barely working. When we start the film with Wally, you know, he's bitter, he's frustrated, he doesn't have a lot of money. He has this line, when I was young, all I thought about was art and music. Now I'm 36 and all I think about is money. And
then it quick cuts to him in front of a subway train.
Which is the most graffitied train I've ever seen in my life. It's no, I'm serious. It is beautiful. Yeah. There is graffiti inside and outside of this train. I love it. This is like the most perfect. It is 1981.
It's a painting.
It really is.
It's just a moving painting.
It really is. It's amazing to look at. But like that line about, you know, like he's frustrated and he doesn't have any money, and like that whole thing about like I drink cold coffee in the morning and I worry that, you know, I'm just glad that there's no cockroaches in it. You know, and you have this guy who's like he's just so frustrated and he doesn't want to see this guy. There is an actual change in one of the characters.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's interesting to think like before I watched this, I thought, is this going to make sense to actually be a movie? What are we doing here? It does, because there is a change in the character. Because by the end of the film, he leaves Andre, and he's glad he's seen him.
Yeah.
And he does have this epiphany. It is this almost like Joycean moment where he takes a cab ride home. You know, he took the subway there, and it's dirty, and it's graffitied, and it's whatever. And you know, all he thinks about, he's miserable, and all he can think about is money. And he just thinks about how he grew up rich.
Yeah.
And in reality, Wallace Shawn did grow up rich. You know, his father was the editor of the New Yorker. And now he doesn't have anything, you know, and it's just like him and his girlfriend. And, you know, she works and puts, you know, food on the table, and he tries to write and doesn't get anywhere. But at the end of the film, you know, after they've had this whole talk, he leaves and he treats himself to a cab ride. And, you know, he's thinking back on his own childhood. And suddenly he's like kind of filled with this being in touch with his own childhood in a way that isn't filled with total bitterness. He actually comes home and he's happy to see his girlfriend. All he wants to do is tell her about his dinner with Andre. So he has this change.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm fascinated with the way that this film is able to have that happen with so little happening. It's just through dialogue. It's just through a conversation.
Well, I have to say, so we've been saying that it's about like theater and that kind of thing, and it sort of is. But like he's sitting here in this hoity-toity restaurant.
Yeah.
Everyone's dressed to the nines, and he's like kind of schlubby looking. Like he's got this tie on, but like he's
like a corduroy jacket and everything, you know.
And then here's Andre, and he's wearing like a sweater.
Yeah.
You know? He's like wearing a sweater. He looks a little bit like Hawkeye in MASH.
Oh,
or something.
Yeah,
Like,
okay.
there's just something like Hawkeye-ish about him. But the thing is, like the wait staff, like they love him. They're like, "Oh, hey, it's you. You know, like glad you're here." That's like they know him, and like there's no like recognition that he's like not dressed for the place. And so that was interesting. And then when he starts talking, it's like a David Lynch film. You know, it's like, no, I mean, like, because you're expecting, you don't know what to expect from whatever he says. And then when he opens his mouth and like this crazy story comes out, like, because in the beginning, like when he starts talking about going to Poland and like, you know, living in this, like in this forest in an abandoned castle and like candles, and suddenly feels so surreal.
Yeah.
Like you're completely transported. You're not in New York City anymore. Like your brain is just like where are we going now?
That's really interesting, because the fact that he tells these stories, and he's very good at building visually for the listener, so that, you know, as you're watching it, yes, you're watching just these two men in a restaurant. I could see in my head, you know, the castle and the forest and these people chanting and running around in circles and candles and, you know, wearing all white or whatever. And like, so it's interesting that like he paints a picture with the words, and it's funny to create a film, right? And not say show a flashback.
Yeah.
You know, this is film. You can do that. They could have gone and made filmed like what he's describing, and just have him narrate over it.
It's just like in Pulp Fiction with the watch.
Yeah.
You know, like you picture that whole journey of that watch.
Yeah.
You know, through the Vietnam camps and, you know, World War II. And
but there's something fascinating and even perverse in a way about making a film with all of these stories with incredible visuals buried in them that your mind is creating, that you'd never see it on film. That's fascinating. That's a really fascinating choice to make that.
You know, if you saw that would be the electric blanket, and your brain wouldn't be working.
Well, yeah. I think there is something not necessarily to that. I feel like I'm forgetting some sort of theory of film. The idea of like not depicting the thing that's being said, right?
Is it like a show don't tell?
Well, no,
or
it's not.
Show,
It's not that at all. Although
Okay.
like people could complain about that, but there is something about like when, you know, the fact that you have this medium where on a stage you know if this was done on a stage, and if this was done very traditionally, what you could have done was you would then say upstage somewhere, do like a representation of what he's talking about, right? You could do something like that. If this in a film, you could have a montage of it happening and then him narrating over it, and then you kind of visually see what's happening. And I find it fascinating because he tells multiple stories. It's not just the one. There's multiple stories that he tells with these fascinating visuals that you could have filmed. And what do? They don't do that. And so the viewer creates their own film in their mind. The castle that I'm picturing is not the castle that you're picturing. It's not the castle that Roger Ebert is picturing.
Yeah.
The abandoned house in Montauk with the graves, dug into the earth and everything. Like
8-foot graves.
8-foot graves,
Sheesh.
which that is a heck of a lot of work. What I'm picturing is not what you're picturing. It's not, and so there is a sort of, by not forcing a vision on the viewer, there is actually perversely a freedom in that I am creating my own film, you're creating your own film. They're not forcing us to see what he is seeing in his own head. Now, that's an insane thing to do because this is the most visual of mediums, right? The whole point of film is to, take stories and dramatize them, and they're refusing to do it here. I don't know. That's amazing when you think about it. It is, when you actually sit there and start pulling apart what this film is, it is a very strange project.
Well, it sounds like it was originally a play. Or that's what Andre had wanted it to be, and Wallace was like, nah, I think it would be a movie. And
so the guy that they got to direct it, I don't even know if they got to direct. I think he volunteered to direct it. Yeah, they didn't think he was right for it because he had directed a movie that Wallace Shawn was in previously. Yeah, Atlantic City, which I think is on our list actually. Oh, okay. Yeah, he's a French director, Louis Malle or Mal. I don't know how. Gosh, I'm terrible with French. He is. Yeah, he's a French director, and he also did the controversial, but I did see it oddly enough. Pretty Baby. The one about Brooke Shields, the one that Polly Platt wrote about the child prostitute, which, interesting movie. I probably shouldn't have seen it when I was 12, but, that's what happens when you're a latchkey kid with cable.
You saw that, but you didn't see Angel.
I know, right? Isn't that bizarre? So, I think I just found it, when you start picking apart what this film is and what it does and how it does it, it is fascinating. And finally, I really have to laugh because this film really, this is definitely going on the list of the best films we've watched for the show. Yeah. Unsurprisingly.
Is this changing your Oscar vote? our own personal Oscars?
Our own personal Oscars for the show, the movies we've watched.
It's not changing mine. Mine is still the apple.
Okay. No, the last thing I want to say is I had to laugh. The one, the final closing music of this is Eric Satie's Gymnopede #1, and I've been trying to learn to play that for a while now.
Well, I recognize you're playing it, so
yeah. Okay,
yeah. I know that's what you're playing.
You know that's what I'm playing. So I had to laugh when the film ends and that music starts up, and I'm just like, oh, this movie really was made for me, wasn't it?
I feel like that's played in one of the Twilight movies.
Oh, it's a very famous piece of music, but I have a feeling this is one reason why people started using it in films again. It's a wonderful piece. Yeah. But I had to laugh when I heard this. I'm just like, oh shoot, I can play this, but poorly.
Yeah, I will say the end of the movie. It's basically they're closing the restaurant. Yeah. But do you feel like it's the end of the movie? Did they talk enough or?
Oh, I do. I think so.
Because it sounds like they had written for a much longer film, and the director kind of cut it down to what we have, and Wallace Shawn says that I think this makes it a more human film what you did, but.
No, I think it is better. Look, I understand why somebody would feel like you could do a 3-hour movie on this. Sure. But I think cutting it down to under 2 hours makes a lot of sense. Because you still have to realize there is an audience who's going to be watching this.
Yeah. And it is interesting structure because it's it's not as much a dialogue as it is Andre talking for 2/3 of the film, and then Wally's response.
And you have to have Wally's response of, most people can't do what you're doing.
Yeah.
We shouldn't necessarily do what you're doing. we shouldn't throw out, rationality and, and science and everything out the window. Although Andre has a great comeback of, people use science almost like it's magic now and it's going to solve everything. And oh my God, when he said that, I just thought about, every time I see somebody, bootlicking Elon Musk and talking about how he's going to take us to Mars. And it's just like, no, he's not. Not just because he's a huckster, but because, interstellar travel is just, I'm sorry, that's not going to happen, man. Like, there are limits to what human beings can, so like his, pulling back from, stop using science as magic, right? Because that's essentially what science and science fiction is.
It's not like Wally has the final word,
No.
but like they both, I get the feeling that Andre is like, at least someone listened to me. Like, maybe I'm crazy, maybe I am a Nazi, but at least someone actually listened to me and we made a connection, and that was a good thing.
So that was My Dinner with Andre, written and starring Wallace, Shawn, and Andre Gregory, and directed by Louis Malle. Or Mal. I'm so bad with French, and I do apologize to anyone who speaks French, and, shoot me a corrective. You can follow us on social media. We are Mary VS Movies on Twitter. We are Mary VS Movies on Instagram. Mary VS Movies at mas.to on Mastodon. Let's see. We are on Tumblr, where it is Mary versus the Movies. And at some point, we'll have a website. I know. I'm sorry. We also have a Patreon where you can help support the show. For $3 a month, you will also get the Patreon-only podcast, Hollywood Avalon, which is us looking at Arthurian films. Episode 1 came out last month. It was on Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Episode 2 will have either come out by the time this is out or will be out very, very soon. That is on the film First Night. But every month we'll be releasing another episode about, Arthurian movies. So I've heard feedback that it's a good show and you should totally support our show. It's only $3 a month. Hey, you're not obligated, obviously. Oh, God. See, that's the thing. I'm not great at shilling for our own stuff, man. It feels weird. And now all I think about is money. We are available on all of the major platforms. We are on Apple Podcasts, where you can rate and review us, and we would really appreciate it if you would. We are on Stitcher and Spotify and Google Play, and you can go to Libsyn and get our RSS feed and plug it into whatever your podcatcher of choice is. So, how do you feel after 2 years of doing this show?
I'm all right.
Yeah?
Yeah.
You ready to do a couple more years?
Yeah, why not? As long as we don't do any George Lucas films.
Well, honey, next time we're going to watch the movie Willow.
I'm actually excited about this.
Yeah, I don't know.
I think it'll be fun.
I think it will. I've never seen Willow. I kind of know what it is, but I kind of don't know what it is.
To be honest, so Val Kilmer's in it.
Yeah. It stars Warwick Davis, right?
Yeah. I last saw it then when it came out.
Okay.
So I don't remember anything. Like, I remember kind of liking it and thinking it was weird or something. I'm curious what Val Kilmer was like, because, like, we loved him in Real Genius.
Mm-hmm. He's had some great roles. Kiss Kiss Bang Bang is great. Top Gun. It was great to see him in Top Gun Maverick. Even though he's got his health issues and. Next episode is going to be Willow, so that'll be interesting. So, until next time.
We're all like Lady Hatfield now. That we all